Yo, what's up everyone, man? How are we all doing? Hope everyone's having a great day, man. History of Britain in 20 minutes. Now, I can't help but feel like this video is either going to result in a little bit of pride, a lot of guilt, a lot of tea, and some shame. I think that's going to be the general ingredients for this video that you're going to see. I feel like it's a 20-minute video. I feel like the pride will begin to wear off about, let's say here, and then the guilt will take up the rest of the video. And I think that's how it will work out. But we'll see. Let's get into it, man. I hope everyone's doing well, man. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Let's get into it.
The United Kingdom is a nation located in the British Isles, made up of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Thousands of years ago, the Isles were inhabited by long-forgotten pre-Celtic people, known as the Beaker culture, named for their distinctive pottery beakers. Little is known of them, but it has been suggested that these people laid the foundations for the mysterious Stonehenge.
It was definitely aliens. I'm sorry, but it was aliens.
A series of heavy standing stones which were transported from 150 miles away and arranged to form a calendar, marking the days of the summer and winter solstice. Over time, waves of Celtic-speaking people arrived from the European continent, who soon came to form the Brittonic, Gaelic and Pictish people. These people were not a unified people, but were rather many tribes who shared a similar pagan religion, language and culture.
Yeah.
The Romans invaded, conquering what's now...
Fuck me. The Romans didn't waste time, did they? Just over a minute in, the Romans are here already. Wait, 2 seconds. Okay, I thought it was off camera.
England and Wales, but failed to conquer the Pictish tribes to the north. The Romans launched several campaigns into this land they called Caledonia. However, their fortifications were soon overrun and abandoned, and they retreated to Hadrian's Wall. Their conquered lands were incorporated into the Roman Empire, becoming the province of Britannia. They brought Roman customs and laws, improved infrastructure and connected many towns and cities with Roman roads.
Still there.
When the Romans left, there was a great migration of Germanic tribes. These were the Jutes, Angles and Saxons, with their language Old English. Their settlement pushed many Britons to areas in Wales, Brittany and a kingdom known as Dumnonia, while Scotland eventually evolved into 4 kingdoms. The smallest of these were the Scots, who were...
I don't actually know much about Scotland's history, as much as our history kind of entwines. I don't actually know much about Scotland.
Originally from Ireland, the Britons of Strathclyde, the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Bernicia and the Picts of Alba. For unknown reasons, the Jutes disappeared from history, but the Angles and Saxons eventually formed 7 kingdoms. Wessex, Sussex, Kent, Essex, East Anglia, Mercia and Bernicia became Northumbria. After the collapse of Dumnonia, the remaining territory of Cornwall fought against the powerful kingdom of Wessex. Cornwall eventually fell under the control of Wessex, but it managed to keep its own culture.
Right, okay.
Wales at this point was also made up of several separate kingdoms, the largest being Gwynedd in the north, Powys in the east and Dyfed to the south. The British Isles soon saw numerous Norse raiders from Scandinavia. These were the Vikings, and they began settlement on many of the Scottish Isles, the Isle of Man, and they even founded the city of Dublin in Ireland.
Yeah, I did know that.
The Scots and the Picts then decided to unite under Kenneth MacAlpine to form the Kingdom of Alba. The Kingdom of Alba grew strong over the years, and eventually Strathclyde was brought into the fold. Meanwhile, Danish Vikings arrived in the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms for conquest. After fighting the King of Wessex, Alfred the Great, the Danes...
I'm sorry, but I can't, as soon as I hear, this period of time, anyone that's watched Vikings, the series, are just going to be like, yeah, so when does Aethel get into it? When does Aethelwulf come into it? If you look, the series is pretty accurate in terms of, the names, the times, and the locations, but, a lot of it's obviously, it's a TV show, so it's a lot more dramatic. But yeah, man, go check that out if you haven't watched it. Sorry, I'm paranoid that my camera's going to lose focus again because last video it just it just went.
Law was formed, a land where the laws of the Danes held influence over the Anglo-Saxons, controlling the region and its affairs. The Anglo-Saxons eventually defeated the last Viking king of York, Eric Bloodaxe, and Athelstan became the first king of the English. Although, the newly formed Kingdom of Denmark would conquer England and even found a short-lived Danish dynasty under Canute.
Yep.
The Norsemen had a dramatic impact on the Isles, so it's no wonder some words in the English language have Norse origin. After defeating formidable sea...
Norse history, you already know this from the channel name. Like, Norse history is so good. The amount of books I've read on Norse history is unreal, but if you don't know much about it, it's worth checking out, man. When I was originally like into history, like when I was in primary school, it was always the gods which interested me the most, like the Roman gods, the Greek gods, and all that, even the Egyptian gods. So like when I didn't really realise how cool Viking history was until after I'd left school, and I started reading like Norse mythology and all that, and it is just unbelievable and very humbling. Like when you realise that how they think the world was made. It's brilliant. Go check it out. I haven't really got any sources off the top of my head, but there's so many books on it. It's unbelievable.
Raiders from Ireland, the Western Isles, Scandinavia, and Anglo-Saxon forces from Mercia, Griffith ap Llywelyn subdued his rivals in southwest Wales. Llywelyn became the only Welsh king ever to rule over the entire territory of Wales. He was defeated by the English Earl Harold Godwinson and killed by his own men, leading to the Welsh kingdoms splitting apart once more. At the death of Edward the Confessor, there was a succession dispute between four claimants. Harold Godwinson was elected as king, and managed to defend England from an invasion by the Norwegian king Harald Hardrada. However, Harold had to march his armies south to defend against Duke William of Normandy, who had crossed the English Channel. According to tradition, at the Battle of Hastings, Harold was killed by an arrow to the eye, and the Norman invaders were victorious. The new King William defeated a number of rebellions, built a new design of castles called moat and baileys, and introduced a number of reforms, like trial by...
For those of you that don't know, moat and baileys, you can kind of tell by the design there. It just basically has a moat around it,
number of reforms,
and it's built on
like
a hill.
Trial by combat and the Domesday Book. The Norman dynasty invaded into...
It's gone. But you know what I mean, the moat and bailey is just surrounded by a moat, and it's a bailey on a hill. That's all it is with a drawbridge. South
Wales and parts of Ireland, creating the Lordship of Ireland. At court, nobles spoke and conducted sessions in the Anglo-Norman language, which endured for centuries and left an incredible mark in development of modern English.
Yep.
After a brief civil war, Henry II would marry Eleanor of Aquitaine, establishing the Angevin Empire, beginning a long rivalry against France. Richard the Lionheart defended much of this territory and also became a central Christian commander during the Third Crusade, achieving considerable victories against his Muslim counterpart, Saladin. Under King John...
Just as a frame of reference, I know I'm just chipping in with extra information. This is during the time that the whole Robin Hood, mythology around that is kind of created. This was the time of, Robin Hood, the man that stole from the rich and gave to the poor. Just as like a little frame of reference.
Considerable victories against his Muslim counterpart, Saladin. Under King John, heavy taxes were imposed on his barons in order to pay for his expensive foreign wars. The barons rebelled and forced John to sign the Magna Carta, a charter that established the principle that everyone was subject to the law, even the king, guaranteeing the rights of individuals, the right to justice, and the right to a fair trial. Most of North Wales remained independently ruled by several Welsh princes, until 1216, when Llewellyn the Great became the ruler of the Principality of Wales. This would be the case until Edward I, who conquered Wales in 1284, effectively becoming part of England. At the death of King Alexander III, Scotland was left with 14 rivals for succession. To prevent civil war, the Scottish magnates asked Edward I of England to elect a claimant. John Balliol was elected king, but was constantly undermined by Edward, who opposed Scottish independence. Edward decided to launch several campaigns to conquer Scotland and depose King John, to which he acquired the nickname Hammer of the Scots, Under a brave Scottish knight William Wallace, the Scots mounted resistance against the English, defeating them at the Battle of Stirling Bridge.
Braveheart.
Edward marched north in person and defeated Wallace in battle, but Wallace managed to escape. He was later captured and executed, but his efforts allowed Robert the Bruce to rise up and defeat the English, securing Scottish independence. When the King of France died without an heir, Edward III was technically eligible to the crown, through his mother. The French court denied his claim and instead installed Philip of Valois. Edward paid homage to Philip as he owned the lands of Gascony and was essentially a vassal to the King of France. Due to disagreements, Edward reasserted his claim to the throne and invaded France, beginning the 100 Years' War.
Yeah. If you've been a member of the channel for a long time, and you'd know the constant banter that I have about the French, it's, we hate them. And there's no other way to put it, we hate them. No, it just feels like the entirety of our histories has just predicated on the idea that we need to get one up on each other. And, it's debatable who started this exactly, but I'm going to go ahead and say it was the French.
The English achieved notable victories at the Battle of Crécy, Poitiers and Agincourt thanks to the technical superiority of the longbow, but was unable to conquer the French with the appearance of Joan of Arc, who lifted the French spirit and turned the tide of the war. Upon the death of Edward III, an entire generation was skipped in the line of succession, which prompted bitter rivalry between several claimants. Most notably were the houses of York and Lancaster. Tensions were high until a bloody age of warfare erupted between these two factions in the Wars of the Roses. It's so in-depth and complicated, this period will likely become a video of its own.
That was the topic in school. I'm sure you had a lot of that. No matter how good you were at history, I was in primary school. I was in my class. I would think that I was up there with the top in history, and when we got to this, I was just like, what? There's so many ins and outs, and to be honest, I didn't find it all that interesting. I just didn't find it interesting at all. And, once you don't find a subject interesting, it's just like, I just want to get this over with. And once you've done it once, you just kind of never revisit it. And I don't blame them, to be fair, because it's just unbelievably complicated.
The wars ended with the arrival of the Tudor dynasty. Henry VIII, wanting a divorce, split with the church, creating his own Church of England. This ultimately led to a series of religious differences between future English monarchs. In between his 6 wives and naval adventures, Henry gave Wales representation in Parliament and created the Kingdom of Ireland, but realistically he only controlled an area known as the Pale. In addition, Henry's paranoia and suspicion amounted to tens of thousands of executions, including his friends and wives.
Go check out the oversimplified video if you haven't seen it. I've done a reaction to it, but check out either of them if you want to know more on that. It's really interesting and very funny.
During the 16th century, the largest and most powerful empire was Spain, under King Philip II. England, under Elizabeth I, were helping Dutch rebels reject Spanish rule, and many English privateers were also intercepting Spanish silver on its journey back from the New World. This angered the Spanish king, and the final straw came when Elizabeth had Mary, Queen of Scots, executed, because she did not want Scotland falling under Catholicism. The Spanish Armada, consisting of 130 ships, was deployed to invade England. At the Battle of Gravelines, an English victory forced the Spanish fleet to sail around the British Isles before storms in the north of Scotland destroyed the remaining ships. In retaliation, the English, led by Sir Francis Drake, amassed their own armada to invade Spain.
I remember this.
But this too became a failed endeavour. Born in this period, William Shakespeare became a renowned poet, playwright and actor, who contributed significantly to English literature. When Queen Elizabeth of England...
I don't know how much you guys cover William Shakespeare in school, but I swear to God, we study him, we were in senior school for 5 years, which is high school, and I swear we study him every single year without fail, but bar year 11, or the 11th grade, whatever you guys call it. It's just ridiculous. He is the entirety of our English literature, I swear to God.
And died without an heir, her closest male relative was James VI of Scotland. James was elected as King of England and Scotland in a personal union, although the countries remained separate political entities. As the first monarch to rule the entire island of Great Britain, several assassination attempts were made by Catholic conspirators. One such assassination attempt was the gunpowder plot by Guy Fawkes, who tried to blow up Parliament. After a failed colony known as Roanoke, England established a successful colony known as Jamestown, which would eventually evolve into the 13 colonies. At first, expeditions...
That escalated so quickly. Yeah, Roanoke was a weird one as well. You know, I don't think, to be honest, many people know about Roanoke, other than the American Horror Story series. But Roanoke is it's a very weird story. You can go research it if you want, but it's very weird.
Which would eventually evolve into the 13 colonies. At first, expeditions to the New World were mainly driven by religious motives, which were predominantly to convert the natives to their faith. But colonies became more profitable, as demand for New World crops like tobacco and sugar increased. British ships also made a monopoly on the transportation of captive African slaves that crossed the Atlantic to the Americas. Millions of Africans were shipped in cramped, horrific conditions to work on brutal plantations in the Americas, and essentially became property to their masters. For 300 years this practice continued in the British Empire until it was fully abolished in 1833. This period also saw a wave of plantations in Ireland, where Irish lands were confiscated and given to English and Scottish settlers. Tensions would rise between Charles I and Parliament. Following disagreements, conflicts between royal and parliamentary authority within England led to the English Civil War. The country became divided between parliamentarians, known as the Roundheads, and royalists, known as the Cavaliers. Under Oliver Cromwell and the New Model Army, the parliamentarians defeated Charles and executed him for treason. Cromwell became Lord Protector and dissolved the monarchy, but shortly after his death it was restored under Charles II. Charles II married Catherine of Braganza.
I was really waiting for him to elaborate more on the whole slavery situation. Like, the reason slavery was abolished here in England was, well, it doesn't really get the credit, but a lot of it was from the Catholic Church. They put pressure on the Parliament to say, you know, all people are made equally in the image of God, and, you know, these black slaves from Africa are no different. And it was a long drawn out process, but the Catholic Church had no small part to play in it. And then Royal Navy for like the following 100 years kind of policed slavery, trying to stomp it out in whichever way they could. But yeah, that's just in case you didn't know how or why slavery got stomped out here.
And when she arrived from Portugal, she introduced the greatest beverage of all time. Tea. Tea had been used by China for centuries, but its arrival in the 17th century captured the interest of the English aristocracy, and soon captivated every other English...
No, you never put the milk in before the water. No, it's tea bag, sugar, water, tea bag out, milk in, bang.
In 1685, a Catholic James II became king in a largely Protestant nation. James's daughter Mary and her Dutch husband William were both Protestant, and many nobles unhappy with the Catholic king invited William to become king. William found considerable support when he invaded, and he was soon crowned King William III in what became known as the Glorious Revolution.
So much
William's
fighting.
supporters dominated the government, there remained a significant following for James II in the Scottish Highlands. Clan MacDonald of Glencoe was one such group who had not been prompt in pledging allegiance to the new monarch. For this reason alone, 38 members of the clan were murdered in what became known as the Massacre of Glencoe. After Scotland's failed colonial endeavours in Nova Scotia and Panama, and an economic crisis in the 1690s, there was a union between England and Scotland, forming the United Kingdom of Great Britain. The House of Stuart had ruled Britain for just over a century, but ended with the death of Queen Anne. Sophia of Hanover was the granddaughter of James I, and her son George became king. Great Britain soon found itself drawn into several European wars, most notable being the War of the Spanish Succession and the 7 Years' War.
Yeah.
Victories in these wars resulted in territory for the empire, particularly in North America, although it resulted in considerable debt. In order to make up for this debt, King George III ordered heavy taxes be placed on the 13 colonies. This, among other reasons, culminated into the American War of Independence, and with financial...
Again, sorry if you haven't seen the oversimplified version. It's a breakdown of that. He's oversimplified on videos. I've done reactions to him, so go check one of them out. And it will talk more about that in depth.
This, among other reasons, culminated into the American War of Independence, and with financial help from France and Spain, the Americans were victorious. The East India Company, which was founded by Elizabeth I, had grown rapidly, and even operated its own military and controlled a sizable amount of territory. The company had set up fortified warehouses where they traded with many Indian rulers, acquiring important luxuries like textiles and spices.
Why did he make the red coats look so evil? I know they kind of were, but Jesus.
One of the most important cities of all was Bengal, as it had a large taxable population. The governor of Bengal, Robert Clive...
Side note, Bengal is not a region. Bengal is a region, not a city. The narrator doesn't get paid enough to record this.
Bengal, as it had a large taxable population. The governor of Bengal, Robert Clive, ordered that the population grow opium to export to China, instead of growing food, as it proved to be a great source of income. However, when a famine struck, it resulted in the deaths of millions of people. Meanwhile, Captain James Cook arrived at New Zealand and the southeast coast of Australia, although he wasn't the first to discover the area because of past Portuguese and Dutch explorers. However, unlike the Dutch and Portuguese, Britain claimed it as their new penal colony, known as New South Wales, with the first convicts arriving in 1778. A new threat had emerged from France, French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte.
Oh my god, when I saw Rest in Peace headphone users, I've shit myself. I was like, uh-oh.
Napoleon had come to dominate most of Europe, but Britain's advantage was that she was an island, and the Royal Navy had become a major force at sea. Invasion of Britain was near impossible, and in a series of coalitions Napoleon was defeated. By the end of the Napoleonic Wars, Britain was growing rapidly into a superpower based on their supremacy of...
Yeah, fuck you, Napoleon. Fuck you. One of many French. One of many.
Napoleonic Wars, Britain was growing rapidly into a superpower based on their supremacy of naval engineering. Furthermore, in Ireland the Great Famine struck, a disease killing potato plants. Ireland, which had merged with Britain, relied heavily on this crop for food, but the British government forced Ireland to export what little food they had to other areas. Without any aid or food, Ireland's population plummeted by half due to starvation and emigration to countries like the United States.
Interesting, one of the few countries that did really help Ireland in that situation, or I say countries, regions, I don't know, it was Palestine. And a lot of the Muslim nations really helped out Ireland during that period of time when, England turned their back on them. Yeah, it's... I think during the whole time of the IRA, some of the IRA members were seen flying Palestinian flags, as kind of like a fuck you to the English because, they were there for us and you weren't. But it's very interesting at that time. Colonel Gaddafi was actually one of the major exporters to the IRA of like weapons and explosives. So yeah, he had a lot to... No, obviously not here, but later on in time.
And emigration to countries like the United States. Things weren't looking so great in India either, as India was rebelling against company rule. The East India Company had employed many Indian soldiers known as sepoys, who were under the command of British soldiers. These sepoys grew increasingly unhappy, and a revolt soon occurred, yet it quickly failed due to a lack of unity between Indians. After the rebellion, the British government took direct control, with Queen Victoria being declared Empress of India. During the 19th century, the world was forever changed by the Industrial Revolution. Society was transformed by technological advances and increasing mechanisation, and would launch Britain to global dominance. Some of the greatest innovations and inventions were the sewing machine, the fire extinguisher, steam-powered engines and...
What the fuck is up with that picture?
Innovations and inventions were the sewing machine, the fire...
What? For a start, what even is this? Is that like a massive candle? And look at this. Absolute cannon. Is that a TV? What is that? Oh, is it meant to be a picture? Oh, that makes sense. But still, that is a... What?
Fire extinguisher, steam-powered engines and turbines, the electric motor and photography. The telegraph was also a major invention, as a message could now be sent from Britain to India in a matter of hours. The establishment of railways and trains also transformed transport forever. Instead of travelling days by horse and carriage, it now only took a matter of hours by train. Engineering and communication advances not only united the empire, they triggered a manufacturing boom like no other. People flocked from rural areas to city centres for jobs. Productivity reached an all-time high, but the consequences of mass migration resulted in extremely cramped and polluted cities. However, with these problems that were generated, it resulted in an improved sewage system.
Yeah.
Newcastle focused on shipbuilding, Manchester the cotton industry, Liverpool became a major trading centre, Middlesbrough fixated itself on iron and steel works. The presence of iron ore, limestone and large coal deposits in the West Midlands and South East Wales prompted the establishment of ironworks, and Scotland boomed in the linen industry. The Victorian era also saw a major change in society, as families from the poorest backgrounds gained access to education, although it was much stricter than today's standards. The 1860s also saw the rise of the greatest food combination ever, fish and chips.
Get in there, my
Towards the
son.
end of the 19th century, European...
Saying that though, me and my girlfriend last night was looking for a chip shop. Couldn't find one. Not a single chip shop's open now because of COVID, because of the cold.
Fish and chips. Towards the end of the 19th century, European powers came together at the Berlin Conference to divide Africa between them. A group in South Africa known as the Boers, who were originally Dutch settlers, proved difficult for the British. The Boers lived in two nations, the Free Orange States and the Republic of Transvaal, and both resisted British rule using guerrilla warfare. To counter this, the British placed many women and children in their tens of thousands into concentration camps, where many died from starvation and disease.
I actually didn't know
Britain
that.
became a major player in the First World War.
I nodded my head as he was saying it, but I didn't know that.
And many men proudly volunteered to serve and protect their country. The Great War, as it was called, saw the use of new technology, such as dreadnoughts, warplanes, artillery, machine guns, grenades, chemical weapons, bolt-action rifles, and the first use of the tank.
Yeah.
Many faced horrific conditions in the trenches and witnessed gruesome battles. Millions died, and many returned home shell-shocked by what they had seen. The empire reached its territorial height in 1921 after gaining territory from Germany and the crumbling Ottoman Empire. The empire now ruled over 400 million people and controlled 1/4 of the world's landmass. But the reality was, Britain could no longer afford to build bases or ships to defend its empire as it had before 1914. Ireland finally managed to break away from British rule and formed the Irish Free State, and shortly after became a republic.
Yeah.
The Second World War was more brutal and horrific than the First. Most of Europe had fallen under German occupation, and under Prime Minister Winston Churchill, Britain stood strong during the Battle of Britain and the Blitz. Britain were extremely successful at intercepting and decoding enemy communications, with the likes of Alan Turing, who cracked the German Enigma code. The war ended with an Allied victory, but many nations within the empire felt a desire for independence, and it was clear the empire was about to break. India was one such nation who were ready to declare their independence. Mohandas Gandhi practiced a non-violent approach, and this proved successful, as shortly after India gained independence. The Commonwealth of Nations was formed to improve relations and economic ties with former colonies. This still remains today, with 53 members united by language, history, culture, and shared values of democracy. The British Empire officially ended with Hong Kong, Britain's last colony, being handed over to China in 1997. The empire committed many atrocities on many different people, imposing their culture and civilization while often wiping out native ones. On the other hand, this brought about globalization and the uniting of the modern world.
Yeah.
And without such innovations and industrialization, the world might have been a very different place. The United Kingdom suffered a small economic recession in 2008, but has since recovered. It is a multicultural society, with each region retaining a presence of its history and culture. If you ever visit, look out for the Welsh cake, the haggis, the whiskey, the Chelsea bun, the parmo, the Cumberland sausage, the Yorkshire pudding, or the Cornish pasty.
Is this what it's come to? Is this where we're at? Let's just have a look here. You see here we're talking about colonising India, we're on about trading spices, penal colonies down in Australia, and now here we are being defined by our bakers. This is what it's come to.
The UK remains a member of NATO, United Nations and the World Trade Organization, and uses the pound currency. In 2016, a referendum resulted in 51.9% of voters in favour to leave the European Union, although the countries within the United Kingdom became divided on the matter, leading to the many questions of its future unity. Thank you for watching. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, like, subscribe, follow us on Twitter, support us on Patreon. Have a good one.
Yeah. That's one thing we've never really discussed on the channel, thinking about it. Brexit. I bet you guys kind of, if you've ever wondered, what I voted on it, because I did vote on the referendum. You're probably wondering what I voted for. And I voted to leave. I did. I know a lot of people are probably unsubscribing now because they think I'm a fascist, but it's not that deep. I have my reasons. But man, that was a great video. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did, man, because as I said, there's stuff in here that is in British history that it's shameful. We did a lot of horrible things. A lot of people today, when you mention, like, here in Britain, when you mention, like, the empire, they're a bit like, I don't want to talk about it. Kind of how, like, if you brought up World War II to a German, they'd be like, I don't want to talk about it. Do you know what I mean? Every country has that level of guilt to it. It just depends how you deal with it. Personally, I'd like, a lot of you, some of you may think it's a bit naive. I don't bear any guilt. Personally, I wasn't there. I wasn't born, But, yeah, it is a touchy subject when you bring up the British Empire to some people. A lot of good things come out of it. A lot of terrible things come out of it. We tend to hear more about the bad stuff now. I think, with social media and everything now, you comment anything on TikTok and you're called a colonizer. It's just jokes. But before I get myself cancelled, like, comment, subscribe, and all of that. I hope you've enjoyed, honestly, man. And planning to have my girlfriend on here the next few episodes. If you want my girlfriend to react to anything, like, react to it as a couple, it can be something I've already done. Like, we got history of the entire world here. I can get her to, like, sit with me and we can react to that together. And obviously I've already seen it, but it'll be cool to get her to react to it. And I can just help her out if she's confused with anything. It'd be cool. Let me know. Definitely put down in the comments what you want to see more of. And yeah, man, peace out. Take it easy. And like, comment, subscribe.